Dodgson! We have Dodgson here! See, nobody cares. And in that, I hope that really doesn't become the sentiment of this film. And so with that, in this episode, I'll be discussing, and welcome to another SciFirst MovieTalk episode, by the way, but in this episode, I'll be discussing the 2022 science fiction action adventure Jurassic World Dominion, as directed by Colin Trevorrow and forming the 6th movie in the overall Jurassic Park franchise, and the final film of the rebooted Jurassic World trilogy. Serving as a direct sequel to the last movie in the series, 2018's Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, and also as the grand finale to the overall franchise, bringing to close events which started in the very first movie, 1993's Jurassic Park. This installment now sees the genetically engineered dinosaurs from Jurassic World let loose at the end of the last movie, now spread across the globe, with both humans and dinos struggling to adjust to the world in which they now find themselves in. We catch up with Owen Grady, as played by Chris Pratt, and Claire Dearing, as played by Bryce Dallas Howard, the two main protagonists from the two movies in the Jurassic World arm of the franchise, who are now actively involved in keeping the dinosaurs safe from human involvement, such as poaching and illegal trade, whilst looking after the granddaughter of Jurassic Park co-founder Benjamin Lockwood, Maisie Lockwood, as played by Isabella Sermon. However, Maisie is kidnapped along with a baby velociraptor and smuggled to the laboratories of one of InGen's rival companies, Biosyn Genetics, headed by the company's now CEO, Dr. Lewis Dodgson, as played by Campbell Scott, a devious character we first saw trying to steal the secrets of Jurassic Park back in the very first movie. Owen and Claire head the search for Maisie and along the way cross paths with none other than Dr. Alan Grant, as played by Sam Neill, and Dr. Ellie Sadler, as played by Laura Dern, and Dr. Ian Malcolm, as played by Jeff Goldblum, who each reprise their roles from the original movie, who themselves are investigating Biosyn for links between them and a spate of attacks on crops across the world. Needless to say, that ultimately, the team find themselves against the might of the dinosaurs collected and raised by Biosyn, with some very familiar old foes and a couple of fresh new teeth, as they strive to uncover the truth behind Dodgson's real intentions for the creatures and humanity in general. So, after 65 million years in the making, or rather nearly 30 years, this was supposed to be it, the grand finale, the epic conclusion to what started out as one of the most phenomenal films in cinematic history. But after all of that time, I can't help but feel like the series has kind of gone out on more of a whimper than a big bang, where the only ideas that they could kind of come up with to close out the saga felt stretched, contrived, and recycled at best. I think it tries to evolve the series into something more quintessential, testing the waters for a move away from simply centering around a bunch of dinosaurs chewing up a load of people we really didn't like. But then essentially that's removing the heart and fun of what makes Jurassic Park, what that was really all about. From what we were expecting from the hype, the trailers, and all of the pre-information about the movie, removing the fact that this was supposed to be epic, this was supposed to be about dinosaurs roaming the earth. Real end of days, apocalyptic stuff. And although this is stated many times in the movie, we only really have their word to go and take for it. For the most part, the rest of the world kind of seems to be getting on just fine, with a few minor technicalities. And in this, the film really misses the beat and the focus it was kind of tipped to have. For a film that was supposed to be a dinosaur anarchy, you know, with the roaming menaces wreaking havoc in every part of the world, what we do get is a surprising amount of terror from a swarm of locusts, with the dinos themselves kind of being leashed for much of the movie's runtime. Okay, so at one point we did have some Brachiosaurus at a building site. I could have sworn I was watching the Flintstones. I did even half expect Owen to come kind of riding down the back of the Brachiosaur shouting, "Wilma!" But hey, We didn't have any weird talking raptor dreams, so there's a plus there. It's still passing forward the question that scientists are always preoccupied with whether or not they could. They never stop to think about whether or not they should. And this is preached a number of times. Hey, Dr. Ian Malcolm even gives us an actual lecture on the subject. The problem is that by the time you've kind of sat through most of the scientific jargon and filibustering that the film gives you, your head's spinning that much that you're drained, that it saps some of the fun out of what comes next. You're still trying to catch up during the sequences where everybody else is being chased down. In an effort to kind of make the plot seem more personal in a situation where such personal interactions could kind of be lost against the scope, they actually did the opposite, and much of the movie felt isolated. And when the elements finally did kind of start to weave together, they felt cobbled and rushed and overly convoluted for what it ended up really being, which, in the end, was just another rehash of escaping dinosaurs in a park, or, in the case of this movie, a remote location. Its focus is totally sporadic, jumping from character to character, story to story, which coincidentally brings everybody from the two halves of the franchise together. But, whilst I do always appreciate a good team-up, this wholly does not feel genuine or earned. Individually, the stories had heart and some merit, and there were threads of ideas that could have moulded together, but in the end, they really didn't scream finale, you know? When it did stop being preachy about the pitfalls of genetic engineering, which it does feel like it kind of forces on you quite a bit to begin with, and when it starts kind of getting into the dino action, it does become a lot more fun, if indeed you've made it this far. It does have some brilliant new dinosaurs to add to its collection to keep us on the edge of our seat, as well as a few old faces making a welcome but if not fleeting return, and I don't just mean the original cast. It also has some great nods back to other events in the overall series, especially those of the first movie, but it doesn't seek to make a kind of grand thing about them, which keeps them kind of subtle and more understated for the most part. So I did appreciate that effort not to kind of make a big thing of that. I did, however, feel that whilst there wasn't much in the way of retconning previous events, I did feel there was an amount of backtracking, softening, if you like, of some of the concepts that was floated in the previous entries in order so that they didn't kind of end up being quite as sensational or controversial, perhaps. Yet the film continued to preach nonetheless. And I would suggest that it didn't kind of seem all that suspenseful either when all's said and done. Everything seemed too easy. I mean, if all that was needed to kind of stop a dinosaur was putting your hand up in front and stop them from taking you as lunch, and look quite stern as you're doing it, then, you know, but indeed, that becomes Chris Pratt's trademark stance. He is now the Dino Whisperer. Overall, it is a real shame that this movie doesn't have the focus it should have had, nor really the premise or ideas we were tipped it would have. It was tipped to be the event of the series, but in the end, although there was so much potential with examining the interactions of the dinosaurs with the outside world on a much grander scale than we had seen before, in the end, it all came back to much of the same old same. It's definitely not the strongest in the series, but there is a lot going on here that just wasn't all that well homed together. It's not a complete disaster, but I don't think it quite quells the thirst, you know, for a worthy end to the series. Not indeed the one that it was tipped to be. Not quite as monumental, nor as final as any other in the franchise, really, not when all's said and done. All being quite a hopscotch mix of events that seemed to be pasted together. Did I enjoy it? Well, yes. I mean, I was never not going to, really, given the blind love that I have for the franchise. But in the end, I wasn't so much disappointed, I suppose, as kind of underwhelmed, uninspired. So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Many thanks for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like. Please do hit that subscribe button for more movie reviews, trailer reactions, and other movie-related content. Absolutely loved having you here at SciFirst MovieTalk, and definitely love to have you back. Most of all, just thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.